breeze, a party come move around like the first rush when the school is out, when the booze is up, when the sun is down. Enjoy the ride, got some pillows in the Chevy. Hey, hey, slide or die, lay low, hitting heavy. Hey, take your time, let me know when you're ready. Hey, hey, couple months I've been messing with this steady. Open for plans tonight. Lost in the afterglow. Oh girl, your love for me keeps calling me, so I'm calling you. Lord, give me love to find. I long for your company. Oh girl, your love for me is a part of me.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. So this is the third part now of the manual conversion on the R34. I've got the gearbox down there behind me and a heap of old bits and pieces off this auto Skyline. What used to be an auto Skyline. So if you've been watching, in the last part we removed this gearbox, got it all sorted, got our flex plate out completely now, sandwich plate is off. This episode we're going to be putting the essentially preparing the car for the manual gearbox. So we'll be prepping this gearbox here, which I won't be showing you guys because I've already made a video on that. I'll put a link to that down in the description if you want to see how to convert a R34 gearbox from pull type to push type. That'll all be done off camera. Things we will be doing, we'll be getting our tail shaft ready to go. We'll get our sandwich plate in to suit the manual, which Ash is doing at the moment. She's cleaning up the new sandwich plate, as you can see over there, and cleaning up the engine support brackets because they were filthy. We're going to get our flywheel on, spigot bearing in, clutch, essentially everything before actually putting the gearbox in, and then that'll I guess conclude this episode. But we're going to get stuck into it. She's going to keep cleaning. I'm going to go get this spigot bush and give you guys a bit of a rundown. So sitting over here is our clutch kit. Like I mentioned, this is an R32 GTR clutch kit that does suit push type gearboxes for 25s. Real handy. We've got clutch alignment tool, chemical release bearing, and a spigot bush, which is floating around somewhere here, also in that same pack. So what I like to do with these spigot bushes, they're actually a porous bush, well, a bearing bush, whatever you want to call it. So what that means is they actually absorb oil. So I'm going to coat this in oil before we put it into the car, just so everything's all right and we don't have any dramas down the track. So essentially the way you do that is you get a little bucket of oil, you sit the bush in there, and you put your fingers over both ends of the bush to hold the oil in there and try to squeeze that oil through, and repeat that process a few times just so you got a bit of oil in the brass, and then it's ready to go be put in the car. It's going to be a mess, it's going to be oily, so I'll do that off camera. Then obviously the bush itself slides into the end of your crankshaft, so just tap that in with a soft mallet and you'll feel when it gets to a point where it's bottomed out and happy. So you guys can figure that one out, but I'll show you a video once I've actually got it in the car so you can get a rough idea on how far it will go. Anyways, I'm going to get started on that. Ash is going to keep cleaning. We'll catch up with you guys shortly. Alrighty, so starting us off, we've got our manual spigot bush in there. For those of you that don't know, there is actually an auto spigot bush that sits in that outer kind of ring, so you will have to hydraulic that out with some bread or some grease before you put the spigot bush in, otherwise it won't fit. The Skyline's one of the only autos that I know of that actually has that, or one of the very few that has that. So just be aware of that. But yeah, we've got that in there. Next thing, we're going to chuck our sandwich plate on, then can put the flywheel, clutch on, do all that kind of stuff. We'll get Ash to get behind the camera and we'll put some bits and pieces on this bad boy. Like I was showing you earlier, we've got those ARP bolts there, so we'll have to get those all torqued up and lubed to spec and should be good to go. Alright, so we've got our sandwich plate, which Ash has all cleaned up. It's looking fresh. So we're going to slap this bad boy on. Just go that way. Like so. Alright, there you go.
Job done, she's now manual.
Yeah, finished. Done. Now, next thing we're going to do is chuck that flywheel on there, so we'll give that surface a quick clean up and then bunt it on there. Okay, so we've now got our flywheel in the car all mounted up and torqued with our ARP bolts. We're just giving that another quick wipe now with some brake cleaner. Next thing, we're putting the clutch on. So what I always like to do as a good kind of practice is always grab the clutch disc. Don't grab it on the material, just don't touch that. Not a good thing. I like to go over to the gearbox and make sure that the actual splines line up with the splines on the gearbox. Being new, this should fit real easy, like so. So you can see the splines line up nicely. There's no movement or anything like that, so that's fine. It moves nice and freely. So that's good. I already knew this was the right clutch, but it's always worth double checking just in case for whatever reason you've got the wrong disc in the pack for whatever reason. So that is A-OK. So now we're going to mount our clutch up again with ARP bolts. So we'll follow the specs that ARP gives in their packaging and we'll get that all bolted up. This is a two-person job. You guys get given pretty good instructions with the Exceedy stuff, so you should be able to follow along yourself. But essentially they've given us an alignment tool, wherever I put that, here, that goes through the spline and the disc, like pictured, and then that will then go into the spigot bush and locate, and that essentially simulates an input shaft just so it's perfectly centered. Once we've got that in there, we can bolt on the cover, and we'll be doing that using our ARP bolts. Make sure you clean the surface face of your clutch cover thoroughly. That's called the pressure plate. Make sure you wash it, bit of brake cleaner, just all residue from shipping. I mean, this one had a sticker on it, you don't want any sticky stuff on there. So that's all good. We're going to prepare our bolts ready to chuck on the car, and then we can get this disc in and get the clutch mounted. Alright, so been a while since I picked up the camera. Probably tell it's a lot darker in here now. It's been many hours. We had some problems with the clutch plate, but we got all that sorted. It's now on the car, all mounted up. The gearbox has been converted over to push type, now ready to go. I'll take you guys over here to our clutch, which is up there, all pink and fancy looking. So that's just the Exceedy heavy duty. Again, ARP bolts, all torqued to spec, all ready to go. And our gearbox over here is all good. So that's all sitting in there all nice. It's all been converted over. It's all happy days. The old oil's out of it. We've got all the sensors in ready to go. So we're going to attempt to lift this into the car, see how we go. And yeah, hopefully in the next kind of 5-10 minutes we should have this located, mounted up in the car and can put some bell housing bolts in. If everything goes to plan. But regardless, we'll get back to you guys once the gearbox is in the car. So as you can probably notice, it's a lot brighter in here now. It's also sunny outside now. It's the next day. We had some issues with the car, and from a physical point of view, we couldn't actually lift this gearbox in with 2 people. So I got another couple of people around this morning, and lucky for us, we now have a mounted gearbox. I know the lighting's pretty terrible under here, but there we go. Fully mounted up, all slotted into place. I've just gone around and used our new bell housing bolt kit. I've got a couple of bolts left to do on the top. The starter's in and all wired up, which is sweet. I'm going to chuck that in, that'll be awesome. Something to keep in mind for you guys, like I said right at the start of this series, there will be parts that we won't know about that we'll find out and let you guys know. One of those parts is these actual bolts here. So on a manual transmission usually, there's like a big, essentially a T-bolt kind of shape. So it's got a big flat on the top with a section that fills out the diameter of that hole, and then it's got like a M10 thread on the end of it. We didn't have that with the auto box. They just use bolts which bolt straight into the auto, so you can combat that just by using those bolts with nuts on the end of them. It's not ideal because it's not the same size, but once it's tight there shouldn't be a lot of movement. But I do recommend getting a set of those bolts. They should be very cheap, like you'll probably pay under $10 for both of those bolts with nuts. But yeah, if you're stuck and need to get away with it, you can definitely get away with it. Anyways, just going to bolt on the rest of the trans bolts. Like I was saying, we've got 2 left on top, and then that is all bolted in and ready to go. Just mounted our slave up there as well, so that's all bolted up looking nice. Then after that, it'll be on to setting up the trans mount, getting the tail shaft back in and this exhaust. But yeah, I'll come back to you guys once we've got this thing fully bolted up, just so it's nice and supported, and give you a rundown on the tail shaft situation. Okay, so just so I've got you guys in the loop, this is the auto rear half that came out of the R34, and what Ash has here is an R33 manual front half. The R33 ones do work. Obviously 34 is ideal if you can find one, but they are hard to find, so 33 ones you can get from almost anywhere, and that has the spline to suit the auto, to suit the manual compared to the auto one, which is completely different. So in theory, and hopefully this all works, but when we bolt this
What do you mean, hopefully?
onto that, it should go into that, and everything should bolt up and there shouldn't be any alignment problems. Should
I
be.
didn't realise there was a possibility that there would be.
No, it's all good.
Okay. Trust me.
So we're going to do that, we're going to bolt it together and then it'll bolt straight into the car, no problems, hopefully.
Stop saying that. You're scaring me.
It's all good. Box is in, all nicely mounted, well not super hectic mounted, but it's in, it's not supported by anything anymore. That can probably come out, but it'll make a mess, so I'll leave that for now. But making good progress, people. Won't be long and we'll have everything done under the car, and then that can conclude this part of the series. But we'll get this tail shaft in and see if it works, and then we can send you with the test dummies and tell you guys if it works. See you shortly. Okay, so good news for an update. That tail shaft did fit perfectly, no messing around or any modification needed. Like I was saying, front half suit gearbox, rear half suit diff, bolt them together and you shouldn't have a problem. So happy days, that's all good and all done. I'm going to chuck that midsection of the exhaust back in, and then we'll drop this thing back down on the ground. But that is the end of this episode. I mainly just wanted to go over getting everything gearbox wise in the car and while it's up in the air. So for this next episode we're going to be going into the final stages, which is getting the pedal box back in the car, which you can see sitting down there. So before I forget, we've got our little tail shaft support piece that I forgot about, but that also has to go back in. But yeah, next episode, pedal box, and we'll go over wiring and the final kind of touch-ups, and then after that should be able to take this thing for a test drive. Hope you guys enjoyed regardless, and we'll see you in the next part of the series.